Hello, welcome to Korea 4.0. I'm your host, Jung Se-mi. The coronavirus, also known as the COVID-19, was declared a pandemic by the World Health Organization. The global markets were thrown into turmoil, and there are rising concerns about the global economy. So in today's Korea 4.0, we take a closer look at the current economic situation in and outside of Korea and see what kind of measures we need in order to overcome this crisis. The global economy is in a panic mode because of the COVID-19 pandemic. Leading economic research organizations stated that the international economy will see a downward trend. Pundits are concerned about seeing a recession in the global economy. Stock markets in the United States and Europe saw a dramatic decline of 10% when the World Health Organization declared COVID-19 as a pandemic on March 11th. This is counter-evidence that the global market is in a chaotic state. On March 15th, the Bank of Korea released a report on the recent foreign economy trends and major issues. This report shows that the global economy has received a powerful blow due to COVID-19. Last month, the Purchasing Managers Index for China's manufacturing business dropped to 35.7 points, seeing a decrease of 14.3 points compared to the previous month. The global value chain collapsed due to China's economic deterioration, and the European economy is going steadily downhill. It is because Germany is heavily reliant on China for trade, and the country makes up a big portion in the European economy. It looks like the American manufacturing sector will also be shaken up. China's production of intermediary goods is seeing a downturn, and it seems like there will be a setback in supply and demand. The warning light is blinking for the South Korean economy as it's heavily dependent on foreign countries. The United Nations Conference on Trade and Development analyzed that the size of Korea's exports will decrease by $38 billion due to COVID-19. The global economy is in a turmoil because of the pandemic. We'll now see how serious the global economy is and what kind of an economic forecast can be made for this year. For today's discussion, I'm pleased to welcome the panel of three of our economic experts, Mr. Bruce Han, Ms. Vivian Jung, and Mr. Ken Lee. Welcome to our program.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Well, I want to start out with this question. Pundits say that the global financial crisis comes once every decade. And in 1997, there was the Asian financial crisis. And following that, of course, there was the 2008 financial crisis. And now it's been 12 years since then. And many are concerned that the probability of the global financial crisis, the next financial crisis, may come soon. So what are your thoughts on this?
So global markets are already witnessing significant slowdown in economic growth. The issue with the coronavirus is that we have not dealt with anything like this before, and we don't know how long this is going to continue. So because of the virus, most of the credit rating agencies, they cut the forecast for Korea's economic growth. S&P 1.6%, Moody's 1.9%, and Bank of Korea 2.1%.
One thing that I would like to point out from this current crisis that we're going through from 1997 and 2008, big difference right now is that right now it is not a systemic crisis. It's a crisis of confidence because we're dealing with something that we just don't know at this point. 1997, there was a real crisis. It was leading to systemic risk. As you know, Thai baht was devaluated on July 2nd, 1997. And then what happened was it affected Korea because Korean institutional investors were some of the biggest investors in Southeast Asia. The market spooked. Banks started calling in loans, cutting off lines. And so investors had to sell their positions at cheap prices. And so And then banks were having a hard time funding themselves in the market as well. And so led to a crisis where in December 1997, Korea received a $57 billion bailout from the IMF. In 2008, it started out as an American crisis which spread globally. The Korean investors at that point, although they had exposure, they had invested in a lot of subprime CDOs, it was still a limited amount though. It didn't really rock the market. But the problem was that they had a hard time, again, funding themselves in the global markets because it started out in the US. And then the US government, like what they're doing right now, they went into superdrive. They did TARP, they did quantitative easing, and the stock market fell like it is going right now. So the market eventually, though, recovered in March of 2009, and then it went up continually until the recent sell-off, basically.
So on the surface, when you only look at the global markets right now, it may look like a financial crisis, but character-wise, it's fundamentally different,
Yes.
you're saying.
Banks are well capitalized, and the thing that everyone should have confidence right now is that not only the Bank of Korea, but the US Federal Reserve, all the central banks globally, like in 2008, are working in tandem together to provide credit, to provide monetary easing. They're cutting rates aggressively. So I think everyone should feel confident that all the governments, all the central banks are working together to work through this problem.
Well, I do want to get to those measures that you just mentioned, but I want to also turn to Mr. Lee. What are your thoughts on this?
Yes, it is reported that the total global debt is around $250 trillion, which is 325% of world GDP. This is a significantly high amount even compared to the global debt in 2008. The possibility we have another financial crisis seems to be quite low. However, we have now COVID-19 pandemic, and this can be another black swan. And then if it is prolonged, then we may have also big trouble.
Mm-hmm. Let's take a closer look at the current economic situation. When you look at the markets right now, as soon as the WHO declared COVID-19 as pandemic, the markets responded severely, and we saw global markets just plunge, and not only global markets, but also Korean market as well. So many people are concerned that this will prolong for a while. So what are your views on that?
I think one of the reasons why the market fell so drastically, so quickly, was that it was also the market's fault. What I mean by that is, if you look at all the investment banks' forecasts for global GDP outlook for this year, and also for Korea, everyone was optimistic. They were thinking about upcoming US elections, maybe even Brexit results, but no one was thinking about a virus. That was the variable that no one was considering. And as Ken mentioned, that was the black swan event. So because everyone was so set up for a positive year, a bullish year, that when this happened, it just took it was like getting sucker punched, like getting punched in the stomach. I feel very confident right now, especially just focusing on Korea, the South Korean government, also the various health agencies, the doctors and nurses working tirelessly around the clock to control this. And as you know, if you look at all the major broadcasting stations and even people in the US government right now, they're praising Korea. They're saying we have to use Korea as a model to overcome this mini crisis at this point. And so another thing that really fills me with confidence right now is that, as you know, the Bank of Korea, they were going to have a policy meeting next month. And more than likely, they were going to make a cut. But the fact that they reacted so quickly to the US Federal Reserve cut on Sunday.
It was immediate.
Immediate, the following day. They got together, they had 50 basis point cut. So the policy rate is at 0.75%, which is actually better positioned than the Fed, because the Fed right now is at 0%,
right,
pretty much. Korea is at 0.75%. We don't know how much they're going to cut further, but there's definitely more room to cut. And another thing that gives me confidence is the supplementary budget. It's 11.7 trillion won, which is about 10 billion US. So I think the government is doing a great job right now trying to ease the pain, the economic and financial burden of Korean citizens.
Now, Mr. Lee, we are also seeing a big drop in oil prices, and much instability has been the talk. China is the world's largest energy consumer, but because of the COVID-19 outbreak, we're seeing a slowing demand in oil as well as gas. So what kind of an impact would this global oil market have?
Yes. The oil price has been decreased significantly. Also, another issue is the Saudi Arabia waging a oil price war against Russia right now. So, however, the U.S. administration already mentioned that they're going to purchase more crude oil to build up the strategic reserve. So, I think in terms of price, it will be stabilized, and then as soon as the COVID-19 issue is gone, the price will significantly increase as the demand increases as well.
Well, I think one of the hot issues among many people is this a mere South Korea, or is it actually an exit Korea action by the foreign investors?
I think at this point, we should not use the term like sell Korea movement. I would not take it personally. It's not like a national attack. The market is falling in tandem with global markets right now. Again, this is a crisis of confidence, and people want to be liquid. They want to have cash. And I think so right now, like in the previous crisis that Korea went through, 97 and 2008, again, they were real systemic crisis events. The markets all came back. So once the virus settles down, what will happen is that we'll see foreign investors coming into the Korean market. And I think this is a good potential buy Korea event coming up. What I'm saying is the won is weaker relative to the dollar. Stock prices, excellent companies' stock prices have fallen. So if I were a foreign investor, maybe not right now, maybe not next week, but it's definitely time to start taking a look seriously at the local market again. You could get more won, buy more stocks at much cheaper levels, valuations right now.
You know, of many asset classes in Korea, especially Korean investors love real estate, and especially with the interest rates now being lowered to 0.75%, what kind of impact would it have on the real estate market?
The Korean real estate market, they cannot divorce themselves from the overall macroeconomic environment, right? So they move in tandem, so there's going to be a limit. So one of the positive things, I think, of a low interest rate is that for first-time home buyers, I think that it would be maybe a good entry point at this point, assuming that they have money for the down payment, because they can borrow, again, mortgage rates will be much lower. But some of the negative things I see are that with low interest rate, obviously, it's going to hurt banks. That's why you see bank stock prices falling a lot. If the interest rates stay too low, then it'll continue to cause a greater rift in social inequality right now. And I think that's one of the concerns for the government and a lot of people, I think.
We will come back after watching this short video clip explaining what kind of impact this virus had on the real economy. COVID-19 is causing unrest in the Korean economy. External economic activities have decreased due to the rapid spread of COVID-19. The domestic economy has been directly hit. The Ministry of Economy and Finance announced the economic trends on March 13th. Compared to the previous year, the sales volume of domestic vehicles decreased by 24.6%. The sales of department stores went down by 30.6% compared to the previous year. The total sales of supermarkets and discount stores also saw a 19.6% decrease. On the flip side, the total sales of online stores saw a whopping increase of 27.4%. People have cut down on outdoor activities and are staying home and are opting for online shopping to purchase the things they need. The deterioration in the domestic economy is causing stagnancy in the job market. A report by the Asian Development Bank states that employment in Korea will decrease by 357,000. The National Statistical Office announced the employment trend for February on March 11th. The number of people who are on temporary breaks reached 680,000, a 29.8% increase compared to the same period in the previous year. It's the highest percent in a decade. People who are on temporary breaks are those who have a job but who are not working. The increase is seen to have been caused by the leave of absence and temporary shutdowns due to COVID-19. If this situation is prolonged, then what kind of an effect will it have on the Korean economy? In worst-case scenario, the Asian Development Bank said South Korea would see its GDP shrink by $16.5 billion due to the COVID-19 outbreak. The South Korean economy has been directly hit by COVID-19, and the citizens are facing one obstacle after another. The South Korean government made a supplementary budget of 11.7 trillion won to combat the economic fallout from the coronavirus outbreak and help shore up vulnerable businesses and domestic consumption. The COVID-19 pandemic will be prolonged, and we will take a closer look at what the South Korean government should do to come up with preemptive measures and policies. Now we're seeing significant economic impact due to the COVID-19 outbreak, and we are also seeing significant decrease in the domestic consumption, and some of the sectors are being hit by this. Which industries shall we take a closer look at the moment?
One of the industry we need to look at is the aviation industry. You know, the airline mainly transport cargoes and passengers across the countries. So they are really concerned about this COVID-19 issue. For instance, the United States, they put ban on the new entry from European countries.
Right.
This announcement impact more than 30 airline companies in North America as well as Europe. And also in Korea, we are now banned and restricted by 150 countries. So in the future, in the near future, if this COVID-19 issue is getting prolonged, then we believe that there will be more merger and acquisition. And then also the current market, we anyway have some kind of saturated market in aviation. And so after this merger and acquisition, due to the COVID-19 virus issue, then after this issue, we will have a more efficient market.
Now, so far, to battle with this economic impact from the COVID-19, now many measures are being set up, and one of them is the basic disaster income. This is all a new system that our government is trying right now. So what do you think of this?
Due to the COVID-19 pandemic, many Korean small businessmen are suffering from it because when we go to the restaurant and stores, there are not many people sitting there. So definitely such kind of rapid relief policy will help the Korean economy, definitely. But in order to do that, also the government policy can make mistake. So it is better if the government can have some proper study before they conduct such a policy as well.
But I think seriously though, for a short-term measure, I don't think it's a bad thing. So as you know, Spain, Italy, and I think even the US right now, they're basically coming out, like in Spain, they said, don't worry about paying your rent for the time being or making your mortgage payments. So I think as a short-term measure, these are all very good. I think it's very important to help people out right now. As Ken said, the small shop owners, I think they're really hurting right now. As you know, if you go outside, all the restaurants are empty. I think that there's still more room to be able to put more money into the system, the supplementary budgets, because fortunately, if you look at the ratio of South Korean debt to GDP, it's relatively low. It's only like 40 to 45% right now. So there's more room, right? So there's more room. And another thing is that a metric to calculate GDP in Korea by the Korean government is government expenditures. That is a component to calculate GDP. So a rise in government expenditure hopefully will rise to a slight rise in Korean GDP.
Ms. Jung, the Fed, as well as the Trump administration, they are deploying full arsenal at the moment to mitigate the economic shock. And of course, the biggest event of this year probably is the US presidential election. Mr. Trump is trying to be reelected for this election. And with all of this situation at the moment, how do you predict the global financial market for the first half and the second half of this year?
We expect further growth of spread of the virus and larger virus drag on growth, but quarantines and control measures, they can slow the virus. Bruce said early in the beginning, but definitely in the first quarter, there will be a downturn because of China and Korea, but in the second quarter, China and Korea will slowly recover, but then there will be another downturn because of Europe and US. Once we hit summer, most experts say that the virus will be controlled, and at the end of this year, all the countries will start to slowly recover.
Now, I want to throw the last question of today's discussion. The global economies, the global world is facing this great uncertainty called COVID-19. For Korea, what do you think, what kind of measures and alternatives do we need to tackle this problem?
In my opinion, I think a few things. First of all, continue monetary and fiscal easing. Secondly is to continue to follow through with the supplementary budget, maybe even a little bit more aggressively going forward, depending on how the situation develops. Third is for the government to aggressively support the ailing industries like airline, tourism, lodging, and retail. And finally, and this might sound a little bit radical, and I'm not saying do this, but something that maybe policymakers may want to consider is if the stock market keeps plummeting, maybe to close it down for a short period of time. Now, there's precedence for this. After 9/11 in the US, the stock market was closed for about 5 days. And most recently, in 2015, Greece closed their stock market for about 5 weeks. And then I think yesterday, the Philippine government closed their stock market as well. I don't see the point of having a plummeting stock market where people psychologically, they're weak, they're feeling not so good right now. And the whole point of the stock market is to have a wealth effect type of sentiment, but people aren't feeling very wealthy right now. And there's no point in destroying shareholder value. And if you're a corporation, they're not hiring kids right now anyway. If their share price falls, I don't think they'll be motivated to hire people going forward. So that's something that we should maybe think about.
Korea, we've been through so much already. 97 Asian crisis, 2008 financial crisis, H1N1 in 2009, and MERS in 2015. So now we have coronavirus. Yes, we've been through difficulties, and I'm highly confident that with all the great guidance of government and other entities, we'll be able to overcome this, and eventually everything will start to go back to normal.
So if I may add, in the long run, the Korean government need to conduct some strong policy to tackle the aging population problem, as well as decreasing labor force issue in Korea. And secondly, we need to have an educational reform to meet global standard and to prepare our students for to qualify for the job requirement in the fourth industrial revolution era. And finally, we also need to have more deregulation in Korean financial industry, because all of the developed countries have a well-functioning financial market, so we need it.
Well, amid the massive outbreak of the COVID-19, there are rising concerns about the global economy as well as domestic economy. So we had an in-depth discussion evaluating the current situation and also hearing your economic outlook on Korea's economy. So thank you so much for sharing your insights today, and thanks for joining us.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Until now, we have visited many different companies and dealt with a wide range of economic issues on our program. I'm sad to say today is the last episode of Korea 4.0, but I want to take this opportunity to say sincere thank you to all of our viewers from all around the world who showed much support and love to our program. Well, I hope to see you soon in another program. And for now, that does it for today's Korea 4.0. Thank you so much for watching until the end, and goodbye.